The boy was born beneath a sky that did not belong to humankind. Before his first cry echoed in the hut of woven reeds and stone, the heavens above had already been scarred into a permanent wound. Clouds gathered like iron, dense and unyielding, hiding the sun from sight. At night the sky glowed with drifting rivers of fire, silent but endless, sliding across the horizon like the veins of some wounded beast. To him, this was ordinary. To the elders, it was a mark of sorrow. "This sky is not ours," they would murmur, their eyes dim with memory. "It was given to us, but it was never meant for us." This world was not earth. Earth lingered only. In broken songs and trembling voices, in stories told by the old around the fire, when the younger ones leaned close to hear. They spoke of oceans that roared with foam, of forests so thick with green that sunlight was swallowed by their leaves, of rains that fell cool and sweet upon the skin. They spoke of skies so blue they seemed endless, unmarred by fire or ash. The boy listened to these tales as though they were myths from a forgotten scripture. He could not imagine such colors. He had only ever known gray and flame. The people had not come here by choice. Humanity had fled from a death of its own making. Their old home crumbled under the weight of war, hunger, and poisoned air. Then the Watchers opened the heavens and offered this valley. No one knew whether it was mercy, conquest, or some darker design. They had come from beyond the stars, their true world hidden, their language unfathomable. They gave no reasons. They simply guided the remnants of mankind here, and here the people stayed. The valley was both haven and prison. It lay between cliffs that shimmered faintly at night, their veins of mineral glowing like embers buried beneath stone. The air was sharp with the taste of metal, the soil dry and resistant. Yet life persisted. Moss clung stubbornly to the cliff. Faces and long root plants buried themselves deep in the earth, storing water in their luminous skins. These kept the people alive, though never full. The huts of stone and reed lined the valley floor, and smoke from cooking fires curled into the poisoned sky. At night the land hummed. The ground itself pulsed with a low vibration, so constant it became almost invisible to the senses. Yet when silence fell, one could press an ear to the soil and hear it clearly, an endless murmur rising from deep below, as though the world itself was alive and restless. Children feared it, imagining monsters beneath their beds, but the boy's mother would smooth his hair and whisper, "This land was not made for us, my son, but the one who made earth, he made this place also. Do not fear the ground or the sky. Fear only forgetting him." Her words stayed with him. When the boy was 8, he saw a Watcher for the first time. He had been digging up long roots with his father, his hands coated in the glowing sap, when a shadow rose along the ridge above them. His heart froze. The figure stood taller than any man, its body like shifting glass, alive with inner fire, its form bent in long segments, rippling as though it were not solid but liquid, bound into shape. The sunlight caught its surface and scattered into colors, violet, green, and pale silver, flickering in slow waves. No face could be seen, only the steady glow of something alive beneath its translucent skin. The field fell silent. Every man and woman bent their heads, refusing to lift their eyes. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The Watcher lingered, gazing down upon them with unknowable intent, and then drifted away. Only when it vanished beyond the ridge did the whispers begin again. The boy asked his father what it was. His father's lips pressed into a hard line. "A Watcher," he said, as though the word itself was heavy enough. Questions died on the boy's tongue. He learned quickly that talk of the Watchers was dangerous. They were a mystery to be endured, not unraveled. Yet curiosity rooted itself deep within him. Years passed in the valley's harsh rhythm. The people worked the soil, bartered moss for cloth and water, and raised their children beneath the shadow of burning skies. The watchers rarely came close, but their presence never left. Some nights their lights rippled along the cliffs, moving, with a grace that was almost beautiful. Other nights their silhouettes loomed like specters, their bodies flickering with pulses of color too swift for human eyes to follow. No one knew if they were guards, predators, or gods in disguise. But the boy knew one truth: they were not God. His mother's prayers made this clear. She prayed in words brought from earth, a tongue he did not fully understand. But their weight pressed into the room like the air before a storm. They were not directed at the watchers, nor at the sky that burned, but to the Creator of all, the one who had hung the stars. That faith was the thread binding her soul, and she wove it into him day by day. It was faith that steadied him the day the watchers finally entered the valley. He was 15 when they descended. The sky split with a sound like tearing metal, silver fire flaring as 3 figures appeared among the huts. Their bodies towered over the people, translucent pillars alive with shifting light. Colors rippled through them, green, gold, crimson, like storms moving beneath a surface of glass. The ground trembled at their steps, though they made no sound. The villagers gathered in dread. Elders dropped to their knees, mothers pulled children close, fathers clenched their jaws in silence. The boy stood behind his father, his chest tight, unable to look away. One watcher moved closer, its inner light pulsed with a rhythm like a heartbeat. Though no words were spoken, a force pressed upon the minds of all present. It was not a sound, but a command, heavy and undeniable. Then the weight narrowed. It fixed upon the boy. His breath stopped. The command deepened. You! The word was not spoken, but it entered him as surely as if carved into bone. His father's hand clamped onto his shoulder, trembling, but nothing could break the bond that had formed. The watcher's light flared, violet and silver pouring from its body to bathe the boy's face. His knees weakened, yet his lips moved in silent prayer. "O God, keep me steady. O God, do not let me fall." The watchers turned as suddenly as they had come, drifting back toward the cliffs. Yet one lingered, bending slightly toward him, its body shifting into pale silver, as though acknowledging him alone. Then it too vanished. Into the shimmer of the air, the people whispered behind him, some with pity, others with awe. To be chosen by the watchers was no honor, it was a burden. The chosen never returned unchanged. That night the boy sat outside his hut, while his mother wept softly within. The valley glowed faintly, the cliffs alive with hidden light, the fire rivers sliding across the heavens above. He looked at the sky, at the fragments of stars peeking through its wounds, and remembered earth he had never seen. He thought of oceans and forests, of rain and blue skies, and then of the Creator who had made them. The watchers were powerful, yes, but they had not made the stars, they had not breathed life into humankind. They were rulers here, but they were not God, so he whispered his prayer again, voice steady this time. "If I must walk into their shadow, let me not forget your light." The heavens answered with sudden brilliance. A burst of silver fire tore across the night, lighting the cliffs as though the sky itself had split. The ground trembled, humming louder, echoing his words, and the boy knew with a chill of certainty his life was no longer his own. The days following the watcher's descent fell heavy upon the valley. The people went about their labors with downcast eyes, but beneath the surface of their silence there pulsed a rhythm of fear. To be chosen was to be set apart, and though no one spoke it aloud, all knew the boy's life had been bound to something greater and more terrible than he could yet understand. The boy's father grew restless, his hands working the long roots with needless force, as though each tear into the soil could undo what had been done. His mother prayed constantly now, her lips moving even as she stirred the bitter water to boil. When she glanced at her son, her eyes softened, but sorrow swam always behind them. The boy himself felt the weight most keenly in the silence of night. The air was never still in the valley. Always the ground hummed. Always the cliffs glowed faintly with mineral fire. But after the watchers had marked him, those sounds grew sharper, more insistent, as though the land itself awaited his next breath. He lay on his mat, staring at the cracks in the roof above, whispering prayers until sleep claimed him. On the third night after their appearance, he dreamed. In his dream, the fire rivers of the sky poured downward into the valley, searing the ground into glass. Out of the molten stone rose figures of shifting light, watchers countless and towering. They bent over the huts like storm clouds, their colors rippling crimson and gold. One bent closest to him. He felt its gaze burn through his chest, searing down into his heart. He cried out to the one God, but the sound was swallowed by the humming earth. Then, just as his knees buckled, a star pierced the sky, one clear, unbroken point of light, and the watcher recoiled as though struck. He awoke trembling, his lips still moving with prayer. The dream had not faded by morning when a group of elders arrived at his family's hut. They wore the cloaks of woven moss that marked their rank, their faces set in solemn calm. Behind them trailed several other villagers, murmuring among themselves. "The watchers have summoned him," one elder said, his voice low, as though the words themselves were dangerous. The boy's father stiffened, but his mother fell to her knees, her hands clutching the elder's garment. "He is still a child," she pleaded. "He cannot walk their path. Take me instead." The elder lowered his gaze but did not speak. None could refuse the watchers. The boy rose, his legs unsteady but his heart firm. He touched his mother's shoulder gently, whispering, "Do not weep. The one who gave me breath will guard it still." She clung to him, her tears wetting his hands, and then she let him go. The elders led him beyond the huts, up the slope toward the ridges. The morning sky hung low and gray, the fire rivers faint behind the clouds. The cliffs rose on either side, their veins glowing like molten metal beneath stone. As they climbed higher, the humming in the ground grew stronger until it seemed to pulse through his bones. At the crest of the ridge, the world opened into a hollowed basin he had never seen before. The valley lay far behind. Before him stretched a chamber of stone where the cliffs bent inward, forming a circle. In its center stood 3 watchers. They loomed taller than he remembered, their bodies fluid yet precise, their inner lights flowing. Like storms caught beneath glass, the colors rippled, violet, green, gold, shifting with patterns he could not follow. They stood in silence, yet the air thickened with their presence, pressing upon his chest. The elders halted at the edge of the chamber, bowing low. The boy alone was urged forward. Step by step he entered the circle. The hum of the earth rose into a near-deafening thrum, vibrating through his skull. He fixed his gaze on the stone at his feet, whispering in his heart, "O God, steady me. I walk not alone." One watcher bent toward him, its body elongated, segments folding like glass drawn thin. A flare of light pulsed from its core, and suddenly his mind was filled with images, rivers of fire flowing through skies, vast caverns beneath, the land glowing with living veins, shapes of creatures unlike any he had seen, writhing in darkness. His breath caught. The images were not words, yet meaning poured through them, chosen. The concept burned through him, carried on waves of alien thought. He staggered, but did not fall. Another watcher bent close. Its colors shifted to deep crimson, then to pale silver. Again the images flooded him, humans kneeling, humans working, humans carrying burdens heavy with light. And then something darker, humans writhing, their flesh torn, their blood shining with the same glow that lived within the watchers themselves. The boy gasped, his hand flying to his chest. He felt their need, he felt their hunger. The weight of it nearly crushed him. He would have fallen had not his heart reached upward, clinging to the name of the one who ruled over all. God is greater, he whispered beneath his breath, his voice trembling but sure. For a moment the images faltered. The watchers' colors rippled faster, their forms bending with agitation. The hum in the ground deepened, resonating like a drumbeat. The boy lifted his eyes at last and met their shifting light. "You did not make me," he said softly, his words more for himself than for them. "You do not own me. My Creator does." The chamber shook. For a breath, he thought they would strike him down. Instead, the watchers withdrew slightly, their bodies flickering in patterns too swift to follow. The pressure upon his mind lessened, though it did not vanish. Then the first watcher extended a limb, long and sharp, like a shard of living glass. It did not touch him, but pointed toward a narrow tunnel at the edge of the chamber. The meaning was clear. He was to enter. The boy's legs trembled, but he straightened. He whispered once more, "O God, keep me in your light," and stepped forward into the mouth of the tunnel. The hum of the earth deepened further, wrapping around him as the darkness swallowed his form. Behind him, the watchers pulsed in silence. Ahead, the shadows thickened, alive with unseen movement. The boy's journey into the heart of their world had begun. The tunnel swallowed the boy like the throat of some great beast. Its walls shimmered faintly with veins of mineral light, the glow pulsing in time with the vibrations that shook the stone. The air was thick and damp, filled with scents unfamiliar. Sweetness, laced with iron, sharpness like burnt resin. Each step echoed, though he felt no true ground beneath his feet. The stone was alive, pliant yet firm, humming as though it recognized his presence. He whispered a prayer, steadying himself, and pressed on. The passage curved downward, bending upon itself in ways that defied his sense of direction. At times, the tunnel widened into caverns where stalactites hung like teeth, dripping fluids that hissed when they touched the floor. At other times it narrowed so tightly he had to slide sideways, his breath shallow, the walls vibrating against his chest, as though trying to read his heartbeat. At last the passage opened into a vast chamber. The ceiling soared high above, lost in shadow, while the floor gleamed with a glassy substance that reflected the alien glow. The chamber pulsed with a rhythm not unlike the beating of a heart, and within that space waited the watchers. Not 3, but many. Dozens towered in silence, their bodies bending and twisting, their inner lights weaving through colors and shapes that dazzled the eye. They stood in a wide circle, enclosing the boy as he stepped hesitantly onto the glassy floor. Sound filled the air, not words, but a resonance, a chorus of tones that swelled until it filled his bones. His knees trembled, yet he remained standing. He lifted his eyes to the shifting lights and whispered inwardly, "The earth and sky belong to God. No power is greater than His." One watcher glided forward, its form a storm of violet and gold. It bent low, extending a limb that curved like molten crystal. Again, images poured into the boy's mind. He saw humans, men and women of the valley, kneeling before watchers. He saw their arms bound, their skin pierced, glowing fluids coursing into them and then out again, carrying something vital from one being to another. He felt the ache of dependency, the endless hunger that lived within the watchers. Then he saw himself. His image was cast in their light, not as he stood now, but older, scarred, carrying the burden of what they required. Around him, other humans, labored, but his place was set apart, chosen. The boy staggered back, clutching his chest. His breath came fast. He did not fully understand what they demanded of him, but he knew it was more than servitude. It was life itself. The watcher pressed. Further, new visions filled his mind, eggs of radiant light, pulsing with energy, waiting to be placed, waiting for a host. His body shuddered, the meaning dawning upon him. Their survival was tied not merely to human labor, but to the human body itself. He nearly cried out, but his faith held him. God is the giver of life, he whispered. Not you, not your kind. The watcher paused. Its colors shifted in agitation, rippling between crimson and pale silver. Then another stepped forward, its body long and fluid, its light calmer. This one did not overwhelm him with visions, but instead extended a limb slowly, as though inviting trust. The boy did not move. He lifted his gaze, steady, though his chest quaked, and said, "You may call me chosen, but I belong to the One above all. If I walk this path, it is only by his will, not yours." For a long moment, the chamber stilled. The watchers' lights flickered rapidly, patterns racing across their bodies as they communed in silence. Then, as though in answer, the circle widened. A gap opened in the ring of towering forms, revealing another passage that led deeper into the stone. The calmer watcher moved aside, gesturing with a slow ripple of light. The meaning was clear. He was to proceed. The boy's breath shook. Every step weighed heavier than the last. Yet he remembered his father's words, his mother's. Tears and the unbroken star of his dream. He whispered again, "Guide me, O God," and stepped into the darkened passage. The new corridors descended further still. Here, the glow of mineral veins was brighter, casting ghostly shadows on the walls. The air grew hotter, carrying a scent of salt and blood. The hum of the earth deepened into a constant throb. At the end of the passage, the boy emerged into another chamber, smaller but far stranger. The walls here were not stone alone. They were lined with living structures, membranous and translucent, like the walls of a creature's body. Within them pulsed shapes that glowed faintly. Oval sacs, each trembling with a slow rhythm as though breathing. The sight froze him where he stood. There were dozens of them, hundreds perhaps, embedded in the walls like seeds in flesh. Their glow cast eerie light across the chamber, bathing him in shifting color. Then he realized the truth. These were not inert sacs. They were alive. They were unborn. A tremor passed through his body. Hosts, the visions had whispered. Chosen. He pressed his hand to his chest, forcing air into his lungs. "You did not make me for this," he whispered to the one above. "I was not created to bear your hunger. My life belongs to God." The sacs quivered as though in response. The chamber hummed louder, the pulse quickening. Then from the shadows at the far end, a watcher emerged, larger than the rest, its body shimmering with layers of light like 1,000 molten mirrors. Its presence filled the chamber with a pressure so great the boy nearly fell to his knees. This was no ordinary watcher. This was one of their leaders. It loomed above him, and the air quaked with its resonance. Images surged into his mind, visions of their dying young, fragile and dependent, unable to live without vessels. He saw them perish in droves when no host was given, their light fading into ash. He felt their desperation, their plea. The weight of it nearly broke him. He could not bear their suffering, yet he could not surrender to their need. He lifted his eyes, filled with tears, and cried in his heart, "O God, strengthen me. Do not let me be undone." The leader drew nearer, lowering itself until its shimmering face hovered close. It did not force more visions into him, but waited, silent, as though expecting an answer. The boy stood trembling, his heart pounding, his body weak beneath the weight of their need. Yet his voice, though quiet, did not waver. "I am chosen," he said, "but not by you. I belong to the One who rules the heavens and the earth. If I walk this path, it will be under his command, not yours." The leader's light rippled furiously, cascading through 1,000 colors. The chamber shook, the sacs quivering violently. For a terrible moment, the boy thought he had sealed his doom. Then, slowly, the watcher withdrew. Its light dimmed to a steady glow, no longer violent but measured. The chamber's trembling ceased. The leader turned, gesturing with a sweeping motion of its crystalline limb. The walls of the chamber parted, revealing yet another passage, darker and deeper than all before. The boy understood. His trial had only begun, and with a whisper of faith he stepped forward into the waiting dark. The passage narrowed until the boy was forced to crawl. Jagged stones scraped his palms, and warm air pressed against his skin as though he were crawling into the lungs of some vast creature. The smell here was heavier, almost unbearable, metallic, and sweet like blood mingled with decayed fruit. His body trembled with exhaustion, but his spirit clung fiercely to the words that rose unbidden in his heart. There is no power but the power of God. No life endures except by His will. At last, the tunnel widened. He dragged himself forward and spilled into a cavern unlike any he had yet seen. It stretched wide and circular, its walls layered in black stone, veined with glowing veins of orange fire. The ground was not smooth glass, but shifting, like plates, of hardened ash floating upon magma. Each step sank slightly, releasing bursts of hot vapor that stung his eyes. Above him, the ceiling pulsed with veins of light that ran like molten rivers, dripping sparks that vanished before they touched the floor. And in the very center of the cavern stood a structure, a towering column of living crystal, spiraled like a great horn, its surface alive with patterns that shifted as though breathing. It was here that the watchers gathered. They emerged from alcoves along the wall, gliding silently across the ashen ground. Their bodies shimmered with subdued colors, not the violent bursts of crimson or violet he had seen before, but dim, smoldering tones, amber, bronze, shadowed blue. They circled the boy slowly, forming a ring around him, their inner lights beating. In rhythm with the fiery veins of the cavern, the boy's heart thundered in his chest. This was no counsel of welcome. This was judgment. The spiral column brightened, its light growing until it cast the cavern in sharp relief. From its surface oozed a substance, clear, glowing faintly, that dripped onto the ground with soft hissing sounds. Wherever it touched, the ash shifted and hardened, forming paths that seemed to pulse with their own life. The watchers pressed closer. One of them, taller than the rest, extended a limb toward the boy. It was not a strike nor an embrace, but something in between. And with that gesture came the flood of vision. He saw humans once more, not as servants nor as chosen, but as tested. Images flashed of men and women brought into caverns, such as this one. He saw them bent beneath trials of fire, walking upon burning stone until their flesh blistered. He saw them pierced by threads of crystal, injected with alien fluids that coursed like molten light through their veins. He saw them endure or fail, and those who faltered crumbled like ash into the earth. This was no mere ceremony. This was the chamber of trials. The boy's knees weakened, but he did not collapse. He clenched his fists, whispering under his breath, "Oh, God, you are my refuge. If I am to pass through fire, let me pass with your name upon my lips." The watcher pressed closer still, its light intensifying. Then, without warning, the ground beneath him split. A fissure yawned wide, spilling forth heat and smoke. From within rose forms unlike the watchers, smaller, malformed, twisted. Their bodies shimmered weakly, their lights flickering like dying embers. They hissed and clawed as they crawled across the ash toward him. The boy staggered back. These were their failures, the broken young, malformed and starved of hosts. Their eyes burned with hunger, their limbs trembling as they reached for him, a trial of fear. The boy's body screamed for flight, but his spirit held. He lifted his eyes heavenward, though no sky was visible here, and cried aloud, "My life belongs to God alone, not to you." The creatures hesitated. Their claws hovered inches from his flesh, their lights flickering uncertainly. For an instant the cavern grew still. Then a roar of resonance filled the air. The watcher's collective voice. The malformed young recoiled, retreating back into the fissure from which they had come. The crack sealed shut with a hiss of fire. The boy fell to his knees, gasping. His strength was nearly gone, but he was not broken. The spiral column pulsed brighter. New veins of liquid crystal flowed across its surface, and the ground beneath him shifted again. This time, sharp spires of stone erupted upward, circling him like a cage. Their tips glowed red, exuding heat that blistered the air. Another trial, this one of endurance. The spires leaned inward, closer and closer, until the heat scorched his skin. He clenched his teeth, sweat pouring down his brow. The temptation to cry out was fierce, but he remembered his mother's voice, steady in the night. When you are pressed, call upon him who made you. No fire can consume what he preserves. And so he prayed, not with elaborate words, but with the simple cry of his heart. "O God, save me. Shield me." The spires shuddered. The heat pressed closer still, and then, without warning, they halted. A silence fell upon the chamber. The watcher's lights dimmed, flickering low. The spiral column's glow steadied, no longer furious but calm. The cage of spires retracted. The cavern floor cooled beneath him. The trial had ended. The boy rose slowly to his feet. His legs trembled, but his gaze was firm. He had endured fire and fear, and still he stood. The watchers stirred. Their lights rippled in patterns of recognition, neither anger nor mercy, but something in between. The leader among them raised its crystalline limb once more. A vision came, not of failure this time, but of passage. He saw himself stepping through a great gate of stone, entering deeper chambers where truths untold awaited him. Beyond those chambers lay not only the alien young, fragile, and waiting, but also a choice, one that would bind not only his life, but the fate of all who lived in the valley. The trial was not the end. It was only preparation. The leader lowered its limb, and the circle of watchers parted. A new passage revealed itself beyond the spiral column, a dark wound cut into the cavern wall. The boy looked once into the shadows, then raised his eyes toward the unseen heavens above, and whispered, "Guide me, Lord, I will walk where you will it." And with unshaken steps he entered the darkness, leaving the chamber of trials behind. The tunnel beyond the chamber of trials wound downward in long spirals. The air grew cooler, damp, carrying the smell of iron and salt. Every sound was amplified, the scrape of his sandals on stone, the faint drip of unseen water, the distant hum of the watcher's resonance. The boy felt his body weakening from exhaustion, but his spirit did not falter. With every step he whispered words of remembrance. "All belongs to God. He is nearer than the breath in my chest. None has power but him." The tunnel widened at last, and he entered a chamber that was different from all the rest. It was vast, circular, yet quieter than the previous halls. The walls were smooth, dark, almost polished, and from their surface hung long threads of crystal that swayed as though stirred by an invisible wind. Their light was softer than fire, pale blue and silver, washing the cavern in a solemn glow. The center of the chamber lay a pool. Its surface shimmered like molten glass, yet it was no water. The liquid was thick, luminous, red as spilled blood. It gave off no heat, no steam, only a stillness that seemed to reach into the bones. The watchers stood in silence around the pool. Their lights were dimmed, as though in reverence. The boy felt his throat tighten. Something sacred or profane was about to unfold. The leader of the watchers stepped forward. Its body pulsed with slow, deliberate colors, patterns that rippled outward in waves. The sound that came with them was deep and resonant, yet soft enough to seep beneath the skin, bypassing the ear, lodging itself within the mind. A vision overtook him. He saw the origin of the red pool. The watchers, young, delicate, and unfinished, incapable of surviving alone, required hosts. They were placed within human flesh, not to kill but to grow, to share life, to anchor themselves in a body strong enough to bear their weight. The pool was not blood from one being, but from many. It was a mingling of human and alien, the remnants of generations who had carried this burden together. The boy staggered backward, his stomach heaving. He saw the images clearly, men and women, chosen, their bodies split open, the alien young placed within them, their lives forever changed by the weight of something not their own. Some lived long, others withered quickly, but all were bound to the Watcher's survival. This was the truth that had been hidden. This was why his family whispered in fear whenever the Watchers approached. This was why his mother's eyes filled with sorrow when she spoke of being chosen. The burden was not ceremony, it was blood. The leader's vision did not stop there, it pressed deeper. He saw what would come if the humans refused. The Watchers young would wither their kind, would collapse, and in their desperation they would not hesitate to turn violent. The fragile peace of the valley would shatter. Fire would consume, and nothing would remain. But if the humans continued to bear the burden, the Watchers' kind would endure. And so, too, in a fragile balance, would humanity. The boy fell to his knees at the edge of the pool. His reflection wavered on the red surface, distorted by its thickness. His face looked older than he remembered, shadowed with dread. His heart thundered with terror. Yet even their words rose within him. My life is not theirs, it is God's. If He wills me to carry, I will carry. If He wills me to resist, I will resist. He alone decides what end awaits. The Watchers stirred. Their lights flickered in patterns of expectation. They waited for him to place his hand into the pool. He hesitated. His skin crawled at the thought of touching it, of mingling himself with the burden it held. Yet something within pressed him forward, not submission to them, but a willingness to test the trial God had placed before him. Slowly, he stretched his hand over the surface. The moment his fingers touched, the red liquid surged upward, wrapping around his wrist like a living thing. It seeped into his pores, burning without heat, flowing into his veins. His vision blurred, his body shuddered. He felt as though a second heartbeat had awakened inside him, not his own, but something alien, echoing in rhythm with his. For a moment, panic seized him. He wanted to tear his arm free, to scrub away the crawling sensation, but he clenched his teeth and whispered, "O Lord, you are greater than fear. Hold me fast." The sensation steadied. The burning subsided into warmth, strange but bearable. The pool released him, leaving no mark but a faint red glow beneath his skin, pulsing like a hidden ember. The Watchers' lights brightened all at once. Their resonance filled the chamber with a sound like chimes, breaking through storm clouds. They had seen what they wished to see. He had touched the pool. He had been marked. The leader extended its crystalline limb once more, touching the air just above his chest. A final vision came, this one not of terror, but of choice. He saw himself standing at a crossroads. On one side, he embraced the burden fully, carrying the alien young within him, ensuring the Watcher's survival and maintaining the fragile peace. On the other, he refused, keeping his body free but risking conflict, perhaps even destruction for both peoples. The leader withdrew, its lights dimming again. The choice was not forced, it was given. The boy drew back from the pool, breathing hard. His body still trembled with the echo of the red glow. He looked at the Watchers, their unblinking forms, their hunger disguised as patience. Then he lifted his gaze higher, as though piercing the stone to the sky above. "My lord," he whispered, "the burden is heavy, yet I know it rests in your hands. If you command me, I will bear it. If you forbid it, I will resist. Show me the path that pleases you." Silence filled the chamber. The Watchers waited. The pool rippled faintly. The boy's heart beat steady, his faith unbroken. For now, he would not answer them. He would wait for the command of one greater than they. And with that, he turned from the pool, his arm still glowing faintly red, and walked into the shadows beyond. The burden of blood was upon him, but it was not yet his to carry. The days after the trial passed like a storm beneath a calm sky. To the watchers, the boy had been marked. To the humans, he had been chosen. But within the valley's scattered dwellings, whispers moved like wildfire. Word of the red pool could not be contained. Those who had seen it before, the older ones who had kept silent under the watcher's gaze, looked upon the boy's faintly glowing arm with both pity and terror. Mothers drew their children closer when he walked by. Fathers clenched their jaws, torn between pride and dread. His friends, once quick with laughter, now spoke cautiously, as though his very shadow carried weight. But not all looked with fear. Some looked with rage. In hidden corners of the valley, far from the watcher's sight, gatherings began. Men and women sat close, their faces lit by dim oil lamps, their voices low but sharp. They spoke of chains hidden beneath silk, of an agreement that was never truly free. They spoke of blood demanded in exchange for survival. And they spoke of defiance. The boy heard these voices when he passed by the gathering caves. Though no one called him in, the words reached his ears. "We are not cattle," one man hissed. "We are not vessels. Let the watchers perish if their kind cannot live without us. Better freedom in ashes than peace in chains." Others murmured their agreement. A woman's voice trembled with grief. "I saw my sister waste away after they chose her. She walked with light in her arm, just as the boy does now, and within months she was gone." The boy paused at the cave mouth, his heart heavy. He could not step inside. He could not declare himself for their cause, nor against it. He walked on, whispering under his breath, "O Lord, guide me. Let me not fall into pride or despair. Let me see what you will." Yet, as the nights deepened, the murmurs hardened into plans. The watchers, for all their perception, seemed unaware, or perhaps indifferent. They continued their silent patterns, moving across the valley like patient guardians. They summoned the mark to the inner chambers, feeding them with strange fruits that glowed from within, bathing them in the resonance of their voices. To them, nothing had changed. The balance of survival continued as it always had, but to the humans, everything had changed. It began with small acts. A young man refused to answer when the watchers summoned him. He vanished the next morning, his dwelling empty, his family silent. A mother slapped the crystalline limb of a watcher that reached for her child. She was not seen again, and each disappearance only fanned the fire of anger. One night the boy woke to distant screams. He rushed from his dwelling into the open air, his breath quick in the cold. Across the valley a dwelling burned. Its walls of woven reed and stone collapsed inward, sparks scattering into the wind. Shadows moved around it, human shadows, not watchers. He saw them flee into the dark, carrying tools glinting red in the firelight. Behind them, a watcher's form lay broken, its light dimming, its resonance fading into silence. The boy's chest tightened. They had killed one. By dawn, the valley was no longer whole. Families looked upon one another with suspicion. Some stood in open defiance, their eyes hard, their voices bitter. Others trembled in fear, urging their children to obey, to stay silent, to endure. The watchers themselves did not retaliate, though their lights burned dimmer, their forms moving, slower, as if uncertain. The boy stood between both worlds. He could not deny the truth of what he had seen in the red pool. The watchers needed the humans desperately, and the humans needed the watchers, though not in the same way. Without their protection, the valley would be swallowed by the hostile wilderness beyond, where beasts prowled and the air grew poisonous, with unseen spores, yet neither side trusted the other fully. The boy felt the weight of that mistrust pressing against his chest, heavier than the faint glow in his arm. On the third night after the burning, the rebels came for him. They entered his dwelling in silence, their faces hidden beneath dark cloth. He did not resist when they beckoned him into the night. He followed them to a cave deep in the hills, where the others gathered around a fire. The air was thick with smoke, the smell of charred meat clinging to the walls. The leader stood, man scarred across his cheek, his eyes sharp with fury. "You," he said, pointing at the boy, "you have seen their secrets. You have touched their cursed pool. You carry their mark. Tell us, what do they plan?" The boy's heart thudded. All eyes were upon him. He thought of lying, of telling. Them, the watchers, meant no harm, but the memory of the visions weighed heavy. He thought of telling them to rise, to break free, but his soul shuddered at the thought of urging bloodshed. He lifted his gaze and spoke with steady voice. "I saw their need. Without us, they perish. With us, they live. They are strong, but not stronger than the one who created the stars. If you rise against them, you may win for a moment, but fire will consume us all. If you submit without question, you will lose yourselves. Neither path is straight. Only God holds the true way." The leader sneered. "God? Did your God save the ones who vanished? Did he stop the watchers from drinking our blood?" The boy answered quietly, "God does not promise ease. He promises truth, and truth is heavier than chains." Murmurs stirred among the rebels. Some nodded, troubled by his words. Others scowled. The leader raised his hand to silence them. "You may keep your prayers, boy," he said coldly, "but we will act. When the watchers call their gathering next, we will strike. And if you will not join us, then stay out of our path." The boy bowed his head. He could not fight his own people, nor could he betray them. He left the cave in silence, the fire's glow fading behind him. As he walked into the night, the stars above shimmered like watchful eyes. He raised his trembling hands and whispered, "O Lord, make me a bridge where others see only walls. Make me a light where others strike in darkness." But the valley was already trembling beneath the weight of what was to come. The shadows of rebellion had lengthened, and soon they would consume all. The night of the gathering arrived with a silence too heavy to be natural. The valley, usually alive with the hum of insects and the faint resonance of the watchers, lay still beneath the stars. The boy walked among his people, summoned as they all had been. The watchers called, and no one dared refuse, at least not openly. Mothers carried infants on their backs, elders leaned on carved staffs, youths kept their eyes low. A procession moved toward the clearing at the valley's heart. Where the watchers waited, they stood tall and radiant, their crystalline forms shimmering faintly with inner light. Yet the boy noticed something he had not seen before. Their glow wavered, as though weakened. The rebellion's whispers had reached them, even if they made no move to show it. Their voices rose together, a deep resonance that pressed against, the chest vibrating bone and thought alike. "Children of the valley," their harmony sang, "we call you again, as we have since the first covenant. Through us you live, and through you we endure. What has been joined must not be broken." The words rolled like thunder, yet among the humans the silence was thick, unnatural, for within the crowd shadows stirred. The boy's eyes caught movement, men and women, their faces grim, hands hidden beneath their cloaks. He recognized some from the cave. Their leader stood among them, his scar glinting in the light. Their patience had burned away. Tonight, rebellion would walk in fire. The watchers extended their arms. Their limbs shimmered like glass, their fingers long and radiant. "The chosen shall step forward," they intoned. "The covenant continues." A stir of unease rippled through the humans. Who would it be? The boy's heart pounded. His arm still bore the faint glow of the red pool, a mark that had not faded. Would they call him again? Would he be bound more deeply into their designs? But before the watchers could speak, a shout cut the night. "Enough!" The leader of the rebels stepped forward, his cloak falling back to reveal the jagged blade in his hand. Others pulled weapons from their sleeves, iron bars, sharpened bone, stolen shards of crystal. The humans around them gasped, some shrinking back, others staring wide-eyed at the act they had long feared yet secretly craved. The watchers turned as one. Their light flared. Their resonance deepened into a warning tone that made the air itself shudder. "You would break the covenant," they sang, their voices vibrating the ground. "You would bring ruin upon all." The leader's face was set in stone. "We would bring freedom." He leapt forward, and fire leapt with him. Torches, hidden beneath cloaks, were hurled at the watchers' feet. Flames raced along the dry grass, climbing, devouring. Smoke twisted upward, choking the stars. Chaos erupted. The boy was shoved aside as humans surged in two directions, some fleeing, others charging. The watchers moved with startling speed, their limbs cutting arcs of light through the smoke. Where they struck, weapons shattered. Where they touched, men fell writhing, their minds undone by the resonance that pulsed from those crystalline hands. Yet the rebels did not break. For every man who fell, two more rushed in. Fire spread across the clearing, its heat biting, its glow painting horror upon every face. Screams mingled with the thunder of alien voices. The covenant had shattered, and blood was now its only ink. The boy stumbled to his knees, coughing on the smoke. His eyes burned, but through the haze he saw it, the leader, scarred and furious, driving his blade into the chest of a watcher. The crystal cracked, light spilling out like liquid fire. The watcher let out a sound not of anger but of sorrow, and collapsed into shards. A cheer rose from the rebels. For a heartbeat it seemed they might triumph, but then the watchers changed. Their lights flared blindingly, no longer wavering. The resonance deepened into a roar that rattled the bones of every living thing. The ground split. Stones cracked. From the forest's edge, creatures unseen before slithered forth, servants of the watchers, summoned by their master's fury. Their forms were twisted, half light, half flesh, their jaws snapping with fire. The humans screamed and scattered. Weapons were useless against these beings. The rebels' courage faltered. Flames consumed their torches, but the valley itself seemed to rise against them. The boy felt the heat on his skin, the terror in his bones. Yet even as the world burned, his heart turned upward. "O Lord, one above all, hear me," he prayed aloud, his voice trembling yet strong. "Do not let us be consumed. Do not let hatred blind us. Show us your mercy." His words seemed to vanish in the fire, but then something shifted. The watcher nearest to him, its form cracked by battle, turned its gaze upon the boy. Its resonance quieted, softer now, like a wounded song. It reached out a trembling hand, not to strike, but to steady itself. The boy, against every instinct of fear, reached back. His glowing arm met the watcher's fractured limb. Light surged, not violent but warm. For a moment fire stilled, smoke drifted without rising. The creatures from the forest paused, their forms flickering. The boy gasped, his heart pounding. Had God answered through him, or had the watchers themselves bent for one instant toward mercy? The leader of the rebels saw it, and rage twisted his face. "Do not touch it," he roared. "They are not of God. They are leeches. Liars!" But his words drowned beneath another wave of resonance, one that spread not in destruction, but in plea. The wounded watcher leaned upon the boy, its light dimming, yet its song reaching out. The covenant, it seemed to say, could yet be remade. The boy's chest swelled with both fear and faith. He knew the choice was before him, not only his, but one that would ripple through every life in the valley. Would the covenant be rewritten in fire and blood, or in something new, something God alone could give? The flames raged higher. The rebels and the watchers clashed still, and in the heart of it, the boy stood, his hand upon a dying alien, his prayer rising louder than the screams. The valley was no longer a place of safety. It had become a crucible of fire and smoke, of screams and thunder. The covenant that once bound human and watcher was torn apart, and all that remained was ruin. The boy stood at the heart of the chaos, his hand pressed to the wounded watcher, its fractured form trembling with a dim glow. Around them the battle raged. Rebels with burning torches and jagged blades clashed against crystalline limbs that cut like scythes. The air was thick with smoke, the earth trembling under the resonance of alien voices. For a moment the boy's touch had stilled the fire. But that peace was fragile, like a candle in a storm. The rebels pressed harder. Emboldened by the sight of one of their oppressors broken, the Watchers answered with fury, their harmony deepening into a resonance that rattled the stones themselves. And still the flames climbed higher. The boy's knees weakened. He felt caught between two worlds, two fires, one of rebellion and hatred, the other of alien power and fear. His breath came ragged, his lungs full of smoke, but still he prayed. "Whoa, Lord, hold me fast," he whispered. "Do not let me stumble now. Show me where your light is, even in this fire." The wounded Watcher shuddered, its crystal body cracking further. Through its fractured form, the boy glimpsed something he had never seen before. Within its chest glowed not only light, but something alive, something pulsing like a heart. It was fragile, it was mortal, and in that moment the boy saw the truth. These beings, for all their power, were not gods. They were creatures bound by weakness, clinging to humans not out of malice alone, but out of need. The leader of the rebels shouted above the din. His voice was hoarse with smoke, his eyes alight with fury. "Strike them all! End the covenant forever!" He raised his jagged blade high, his scarred face a mask of vengeance. Around him rebels surged, driving into the Watchers with reckless desperation. But even as they pressed forward, the Watchers unleashed their hidden strength. From the edges of the clearing, more of their servants poured forth, creatures of half-light, their forms bending and snapping like fire itself. They descended upon the rebels, scattering them in cries of terror. The boy's stomach twisted. If this continued, there would be nothing left. No covenant, no rebellion, only ashes. The wounded Watcher gripped his arm weakly, its resonance trembling like a plea. Its fractured voice entered his bones, not words, but impressions. Help, bind, survive. He shook his head, tears burning his eyes. "I am only a boy," he whispered. "I cannot bind worlds together." But then he remembered. He was not alone. The one God who made the stars, who breathed life into clay, who ruled. Over all, he was not absent. Even here, even in this valley of smoke and death, his hand was not shortened. The boy rose to his feet, steadying the Watcher. His voice cracked, but he lifted it high above the fire and the screams. "Listen to me," he cried, his words carrying more than his own strength. These beings are not gods. They are creatures like us, powerful, yes, but frail beneath their crystal skin. And his chest swelled as he raised his hand toward the burning sky. "We have one God, higher than all, who alone holds life and death." His words cut through the chaos. Humans paused, their torches trembling. Even the rebels glanced toward him, their eyes wide, unsure whether to curse him or follow. The Watchers faltered in their resonance, their harmony rippling with dissonance. The rebel leader's face twisted with rage. "Silence him," he bellowed. "He speaks their lies." He surged forward, his blade flashing. The boy's heart lurched. The strike was meant for him. But before the blade could fall, the wounded Watcher moved. With the last of its strength, it intercepted the blow, its fractured body shattering under the strike. Crystal shards exploded in a shower of light, and the leader was thrown back. His blade splintered, his arm burned by the alien's glow. The Watcher fell into pieces at the boy's feet, its light flickering once, then fading. For a moment, silence swept through the battlefield. Both human and Watcher turned to look at the boy standing over the fallen being, his hand still outstretched, his face lit by the dying glow. A tremor ran through him, not of fear, but of resolve. He had been chosen, not by the Watchers, not by the rebels, but by God himself. This moment was not chance, it was purpose. "Stop this," the boy cried again, his voice breaking. "Stop before nothing is left. You think freedom comes with fire, but you are only burning your children's breath. And you He turned toward the watchers, their tall forms looming in the smoke. "You think power will bind us, but you are only breaking the hands you need to live." The rebels shifted uneasily. Some lowered their torches. Mothers clutched their children tighter. The watchers' light dimmed, their resonance uncertain, wavering like wind through broken glass. The leader staggered to his feet, his face contorted with pain and fury. "Do not listen," he spat. "He is their tool, their pet. Freedom demands blood." He lunged again, but this time the boy did not flinch. His hand shot out, gripping the leader's wrist. Their eyes locked, one burning with hate, the other steady with faith. "You want freedom," the boy said, his voice low but firm. "But freedom without God is only another chain." For the first time, the leader faltered. His arm trembled, his blade shaking. The boy's words seemed to strike deeper than any weapon. Around them, the fire roared. The watchers stood silent. The rebels wavered. The valley itself seemed to hold its breath. This was the breaking point. One word, one act, and the covenant would either shatter forever or be remade in something new. The boy lifted his face to the smoke-filled sky. His prayer was not shouted this time, but whispered, yet it carried with a strength greater than his own. "Lord, let your will be done. Not theirs, not mine, yours alone." And with those words, the balance of the valley began to shift. When the smoke finally thinned and the cries faded into silence, the valley was unrecognizable. What had once been a cradle of green terraces and flowing water was now a scorched hollow, blackened by fire and scarred by violence. Trees that had reached to the sky now lay charred and broken, their trunks split and steaming. The great pools where children had once laughed were shallow pits of ash and mud. The covenant that had endured for generations lay in ruin, scattered like shattered pottery across the ground. And yet, within the destruction, there was still life. The boy walked slowly among the remains, the hem of his tunic gray with soot, his skin streaked with ash and sweat. His steps were weary, but his eyes were unbowed. Each breath hurt, but he lifted his face to the smoke-streaked heavens, whispering prayers as he went. "Lord, you made the stars," he murmured. "You set them in their courses. If you can hang fire in the heavens, you can plant life even in this ruin. Show me where to walk." Around him, survivors gathered. Mothers pulled their children close, their faces hollow with grief but alive, with the fragile spark of hope. The rebels who had raised their torches now stood hushed, their anger drowned in the sea of death they had unleashed. Some knelt where their kin lay still, tears streaking through the ash on their cheeks. Others looked toward the boy, as if waiting for his voice to guide them. The watchers, too, were changed. Their tall, luminous bodies no longer glowed with unbroken harmony. Cracks marred their crystal-like skin, and their resonance trembled with dissonance, as though they mourned with sound rather than tears. They did not move to strike again, nor to bind the humans by force. Instead, they stood apart, silent and uncertain, like strangers in a world that no longer belonged to them. The boy stopped at the shattered remains of the Watcher who had given its life to shield him. The fragments lay scattered in the soot. Their once brilliant glow dimmed to faint flickers. He knelt beside them, gathering a shard into his hands. It was warm, almost like flesh, pulsing faintly before it faded altogether. He bowed his head. "You are not my God," he whispered, "but you are a creature of God's making. You gave what you could, and I will not forget." His words carried across the still air. Some of the humans shifted uncomfortably, unused to hearing kindness, spoken toward their former oppressors. Others lowered their heads, uncertain whether it was grief or reverence that stirred within them. The watchers themselves resonated softly, their tones low and sorrowful. As the boy rose, he looked upon the valley with new eyes. Ash covered everything, but beneath it he could see the faint glimmers of seeds buried in the soil, spared by the flames. Life was hidden here, waiting to rise again. And he knew, as surely as he knew his own heartbeat, that God's hand was not finished with them. He turned to the people. His voice was raw, but it carried. "This is not the end," he said. "Ashes are not death, they are soil. Fire has taken much, but it cannot take what God has planted in the hearts of men. We will rise from this, not by the power of the watchers, nor by the wrath of rebels, but by the mercy of the One above all. If we walk in His light, no valley, no fire, no alien hand can end us." The people stirred, some wept, some murmured, but many lifted their heads for the first time since the battle began. Hope, fragile as a new sprout in scorched soil, began to grow among them. The watchers' resonance deepened. They stepped closer, but not as masters. Their light was dimmer, their posture lowered, almost humbled. One among them, its crystalline form scarred with long fractures, knelt slightly, its voice a trembling chord that carried to every ear, "We cannot continue as before." The words were broken, halting, but they were words, translated through sound and memory. The people gasped. For generations, the watchers had spoken only through resonance and impression, never lowering themselves to human language. Now here in the ashes, they bent toward the humans they once ruled. The boy looked upon the scarred watcher and answered quietly, but firmly, "If there is to be a new path, it will not be as rulers and servants. It will be as creatures together under the God who made us all." A silence followed, heavy, expectant. The rebel leader stood at the edge of the crowd, his face wrapped in shadow. His arm was still burned from the shattered watcher's sacrifice, his blade gone. He looked at the boy with an expression that wavered between bitterness and something softer, something almost like respect. He said nothing, but for the first time, he did not shout. The day waned, and the valley lay quiet, broken but alive. The people set about tending to the wounded, gathering water, burying their dead. The watchers watched, silent and subdued, their light dimmed but not extinguished. That night, as the stars pierced through the veil of smoke, the boy lay upon the ground, weary but unbroken. He gazed at the heavens, the vast canvas of light above, and felt a strange peace settle over him. "The earth is scarred," he whispered, "but the heavens remain. And you, Lord, remain above all. Teach us to walk rightly. Teach me to lead. Only as you will." His eyes closed, not in despair but in trust. Tomorrow would demand more of him than today. He was no longer only a boy. He had become a voice, a witness, perhaps even the seed of a new covenant, and though the valley was now a garden of ashes, he believed with all his heart that life would bloom again. For the hand of God was not finished. Dawn broke slowly over the valley of ash, washing the ruins in pale silver light. Smoke still coiled in the air, and the charred skeletons of trees stood like blackened sentinels against the rising sun. The people stirred, weary but alive. Their eyes followed the boy wherever he walked now, as though the fire had carved into him some authority he never sought. But his heart was heavy. He had seen death too close, heard the screams of children, felt the breath of fire sear his skin. He knew the struggle was not finished. The watchers lingered on the edges of the valley, their luminous forms fractured, their resonance subdued. They no longer pressed their will upon the humans, but neither had they released their claim entirely. A balance hung in the air, fragile, temporary. It was then that the scarred watcher approached him, its cracked body glowing faintly, each step resonating with a mournful chord. Unlike the others, it bowed its head low before the boy, as though surrendering something unseen. "You must come," it said, the words halting but clear. "The heart of our kind waits. Without you, we wither. Without you, we die. The passage must be walked." The people murmured in fear, for never had a watcher spoken so plainly. Some clutched their children and begged the boy not to go. Others, still burning with suspicion, whispered that this was another trap, another chain in disguise. But the boy lifted his hand. "If God has placed this road before me, then I will walk it. No fire, no fear, no alien will change the truth of his dominion. If this is the path of his will, then so be it. So it was decided. With a small band of companions, 2 elders, the scarred watcher, and the rebel leader who followed in silence, the boy set out from the valley, leaving behind the garden of ashes for a journey deeper than any had dared take before. They walked for many days through terrain few humans had seen. The land shifted strangely here, as if the earth itself remembered the shaping hands of its first makers. Mountains rose like jagged teeth, their cliffs marked by glowing veins of mineral that pulsed faintly in the dark. Rivers of silver liquid cut through valleys, steaming in the cold air, their surfaces alive with eerie light. At night the watcher guided them by resonance, each tone echoing off stone and sky, leading them ever forward. The humans huddled by small fires, whispering prayers for strength, and the boy, though burdened with dread, lifted his face to the stars, speaking quietly to the one above them all. Lord, I walk where none have walked. I enter shadows where men are frail. But you are greater than shadows. You are greater than fear. Be near me. At last they reached a cavern unlike any other, a maw in the earth, vast and circular, its rim lined with crystalline pillars that hummed softly in the air. The scarred watcher bowed deeply here, lowering itself until its fractured body touched the ground. This is the passage, it said. The beginning and the end, the heart of what we are. The boy stepped forward, the rebel at his side. Together they descended into the cavern. The air grew heavy, thick with energy that pressed against their chests. Strange light swirled along the walls, living patterns that shifted and breathed, and then they came to it, the heart. It was not a single thing, but a vast chamber alive with brilliance. Towers of crystalline growth rose from the floor, joined together by veins of glowing liquid that pulsed like blood. The air thrummed with sound, a chorus of resonance so deep it vibrated in their bones. Within that chorus, faces seemed to flicker, faces of watchers long dead, their memory alive in the crystal. The boy stood trembling. It was beautiful and terrible at once, like staring into the sun. The scarred watcher's voice shook. This is what we are, a hive of memory, a web of light. We endure only by joining flesh with flesh, binding our line to yours. Without it, we end. But we have broken covenant. We have wounded those we needed. Now only one thread remains. It lowered itself before the boy. You are that thread. The rebels spat on the ground. They want to use you, just as they've always done, don't you see? This is no covenant. It's slavery. The boy turned to him, his eyes steady. And yet, without us, they die. Without them we may also wither, for they have shaped this world as much as we have lived in it. If God has woven our fates together, then it is not slavery, it is a test. He stepped closer to the heart, the resonance swelling around him like an ocean. He placed his hand upon the crystal, and a surge of visions struck him. He saw generations of humans born in alien light, cradled and consumed. He saw watchers bending over them, needing, taking, yet also giving life in strange forms. He saw rebellion and fire, blood and mercy. And through it all, he saw the hand of God, not in the watcher's glow, not in human rage, but in the hidden thread that kept them from utter destruction. Tears burned his eyes. He fell to his knees, whispering, Lord, I am small, I am dust, but you are vast, and you are merciful. If this burden is mine to bear, then I bear it not in my strength, but in yours. The resonance shifted. The heart pulsed with a deeper light, not devouring, but enfolding. It did not demand his life. It echoed his prayer. The crystal's brilliance dimmed to a softer glow, its hunger quieted. And for the first time, the watchers lowered their heads, their resonance not of need, but of reverence. The rebel watched, speechless. The elders wept. The scarred watcher trembled with light, bowing so low its form cracked further. You have changed it, it whispered. Never before, never by any human hand. The boy rose, weak but unbroken. Not by my hand, he said softly, by his. And so the heart quieted, its hunger eased, as though the touch of true faith had healed. Something deeper than need. When they left the cavern, the air outside seemed brighter, the stars above clearer. The boy's companions walked in silence, shaken by what they had seen. Even the rebel who had cursed every watcher could not find words now. But in the boy's heart there was peace. He knew the journey was not yet over. There would be trials, still, and choices that would scar generations. Yet he also knew this. The one God had shown his power even here, in the deepest chamber of alien need, and that was enough. The valley greeted them in silence when they returned. Ash still clung to the earth, though here and there fragile shoots of green had begun to push through the soot, stubborn life rising against all odds. The people gathered at once, their faces filled with anxious hope as they saw the boy walking at the front of the small company. Behind him came the scarred watcher, its body still fractured but glowing faintly with renewed strength, and the elders who leaned upon one another, eyes wide from what they had witnessed in the cavern. The rebel lingered at the edge, his face unreadable, torn between pride and shame. The boy stood before them all, weary yet resolute. He looked upon the survivors, men, women, children, their bodies scarred by fire, their souls heavy with grief. And he spoke, his voice steady, carrying across the quiet valley. The watchers sought to bind us through fear. They needed us, yet they broke us. But God, who rules over heaven and earth, has shown his power even in their deepest chamber. He has reminded us that no bond of flesh, no alien hunger, no chain of terror can match his sovereignty. He alone is eternal. The people listened, and the murmurs rose among them, not of rebellion or despair, but of cautious reverence. They had seen the fire, endured the hunger, watched their children nearly stolen. Yet in the boy's words was a thread of something greater than fear, hope. The scarred watcher lowered itself, its resonance soft and trembling. "We live only because of you," it said, though its gaze seemed to look through the boy toward something higher, something unseen. "We thought ourselves gods. We were wrong. There is one above all, beyond crystal and blood. We bow to him now." For the first time, the humans saw one of the alien giants bend not out of hunger, not out of dominance, but out of humility. And something shifted in the air as though a burden centuries old had been loosened. In the days that followed, the fragile covenant began to take shape. The watchers, their hunger subdued by the heart's quieting, kept their distance. They no longer demanded bodies as vessels. Instead, they lingered at the edge of the valley, learning to exist without forcing their will upon flesh. They did not yet know if their kind could endure in this new way, but they tried. The humans rebuilt, their hands turning ash into gardens, their faith binding them together when fear threatened to scatter them. At night, families gathered around, small fires, listening as the boy recounted the journey into the cavern. All was ending, not with his strength, but with the power of the one who guided him. "Remember," he would say, "we live because he willed it so. We endure because he rules above all worlds. The watchers are vast, but he is greater. The fire devours, but his mercy is deeper. Hold to him, and no shadow can overcome you." The rebel struggled in those days. He watched the people honor thee. Boy saw the watchers bow their heads in silence, and his heart burned with confusion. Yet one evening, as the stars rose, he approached the boy while he prayed alone on the ridge. "Why did you not destroy them?" he demanded. "Why leave them breathing after all they've done to us?" The boy lifted his eyes from the sky, calm and unwavering, "Because vengeance is not mine. It belongs to God alone. My task was not to wipe them away, but to remind both them and us who truly holds power. If he had willed their end, it would have come, but he stayed his hand. So I obey." The rebel had no answer. He turned away, but his heart, too, began to soften in the silence. Seasons passed. The valley greened once more, rivers flowed clear, and the sky that had once burned now stretched vast and bright above them. The people thrived, though scars remained, reminders of fire, of chains, of near despair. Yet those scars became part of their strength, etched into memory like the deep rings of a tree that had survived storms. The watchers grew fewer, their forms dimming as though their age was catching up to them. Some faded into the crystal forests, their resonance scattering like echoes. But they no longer clung to humans as lifelines. The heart had shifted, its hunger eased, and whatever bond remained was no longer forged through fear. The scarred watcher, the last of its kind to linger near, often sat at the edge of the valley watching the boy, now nearly a man, work among his people. And one evening, as the stars wheeled above, it spoke softly. "When I first saw you, I saw only a vessel. But you showed me something greater. You taught me that power is not in consuming nor in binding, but in bowing before the one greater than all. When my light fades, I will not fear, for I have glimpsed truth." The boy placed a hand upon its cracked form, his eyes shining with quiet faith. "Then you will not fade into nothing, for the one who made the stars also knows your name. He wastes nothing. Even your end will serve his glory." The watcher bowed its head, and, in the days that followed, its light finally stilled. Years later, when the boy was a man grown, the people would tell their children of the days of fire and hunger. They would speak of the watchers, terrible, luminous, and fallen, and of the covenant that ended in ashes but birthed something new. But above all, they would speak of the one God, whose hand preserved them, whose power humbled even giants. And when the children asked how they survived, the answer was always the same. Because one boy walked into the heart of shadows, carrying nothing but faith in the one above all. And so the tale was carried forward, generation after generation, not as a story of human strength nor alien power, but as a living testament that in every world, under every sky, there is one God who reigns supreme.